It's really great to have you with us this afternoon for an In Conversation With. We've been at St. Mark's doing these In Conversations as an opportunity to be inspired, to find out what other people are up to and learning lessons from this particular season. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Caroline, it's wonderful to be with you.
Brilliant. So I've had a little Google about you, Phil Knox, and it says at the moment that you are head of mission to young adults at Evangelical Alliance. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, of course I can. I mean, first of all, let me say what that is and what I do. I guess I'm an evangelist, really. And so the original plan for my life was to go into law. I'm from a family of lawyers and evangelists. And so I did a law degree, and then, but always wanted to kind of tell other people about Jesus. And so the law thing kind of never worked out. I got the degree, but really felt God call me towards evangelism. And so my role within the Evangelical Alliance is, I don't know how well people will know the EA, but we represent the 2 million evangelicals across the UK. Our heartbeat is to together make Jesus known. And so my bit within that is, first of all, to try and help every Christian think about how they share their faith with their friends. I think if the world's changed, it's through ordinary Christians sharing their story, walking alongside mates, introducing them to Jesus. But then alongside that as well, I carry a real passion for what is still just about my own generation. I'm not sure. I get the great thing about being head of mission to young adults is you get to self-define what a young adult is. So I'm 37. I'm still in the kind of 20s and 30s bracket. I'm clinging on. But the head of mission to young adults really is about trying to help churches think about kind of the cultures, how they help the young adults feel like they belong. Young adults often known as the missing generation. I guess my heart is that they're not known as the missing generation, they're known as the found generation, and that we see significant numbers of young adults coming to know Jesus, and churches full of all ages. So that in a kind of nutshell is my job.
Oh, that's brilliant. And we're going to be really keen today to look at a little bit about evangelism and mission to younger adults. But it's been a really weird year. I mean, there's so many different labels we could say, surreals, testing or challenging. But we're really keen to find out, what has the last year been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been tough, hasn't it? I think if I'm really honest, I've really struggled. I've struggled on a number of different levels, some more superficial than others, let's say. I think I've really struggled with social distancing and not seeing friends. There's lots of people I've really missed on a work level. I've really missed being in a working environment, not seeing people in 3D rather than 2D. My job is a lot of speaking, and I've really missed kind of getting out and speaking to large groups of people and preaching and seeing people come to faith in that way. On a really personal level, which is a bit less selfish, I guess, we've been through two really tough family bereavements. So in January last year, my brother-in-law died of cancer. And then in June, my mum, who was my last surviving parent, died also of cancer. And again, especially around, when my brother-in-law died, we're actually able to go to a funeral because it was kind of before lockdown. But mum's funeral was kind of family only, and walking that journey, where only one person was allowed to visit her and stuff. That was really, really tough. And alongside that, 2 kids at home trying to homeschool. It's been really tough on one level. But I think also, I'm sure many people will resonate with this. There's been so much to be thankful for as well. I'm so grateful I've got a job. I'm so grateful to have a garden. Thinking of some people who lived in a flat through that first lockdown, and it must have been loads more difficult. I mean, I think it's been really tough, but I've also become more grateful for the things that I do have than probably before COVID. And I think when we're allowed to go on holiday again, there'll be a moment of appreciation that I have for getting on a plane, for sitting by a pool, that I would not have appreciated without this. So I think it's been those two sides of the coin, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're highlighting that there's the test and the opportunity in amongst it. So how have you, what's been keeping you going or keeping you anchored in that storm of it all?
I think a couple of things really. I think relationships been really key. So I think I don't know how, for me, friendships really changed. because because of social distancing and not having the same rhythms in our lives as we used to, the kind of what I'd call incidental friendships have just not happened. So the people I sit next to at work, the people I see on a Sunday morning at church, you don't see those people in the same way anymore. So I think what that's meant for all of us is that we've had to be really intentional about who we spend time with. And so I think one of the things that's really kept me going has been with a few friends being really intentional, saying, look, we can't see each other in the ways that we used to. But so I've got, with my best mate, we run together a couple of times a week, and spend hours talking. Whereas, previously we'd be in and out of each other's houses, all that kind of stuff. So I think those kind of key relationships have been really key. I think the other thing is kind of, that's really kept me going has been good. I've had to, whenever I felt I've struggled, I've had to reset and gone, why am I feeling like this? And what disciplines and what the rhythms do I have to change in my life to get me out of this rut? So really tangible example of that is, as well as the kind of, the extraordinary bereavements that we've had. It was a moment in January where I was really down about looking forward and going, this just another lockdown, and it was cold and it was dark and, just some of that stuff. And so I just started walking every morning. So as soon as the alarm would go off, I put some clothes on and go for a walk around our community, spend some time listening to Bible in one ear, bit of praying, and just tried to put rhythms in my life that had changed. So I think those two things really, I guess, they both begin with R, and still I'm a preacher, relationships and rhythms. That was completely unintentional, but I think those have been the things that have got me through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like we're in an interesting place now, aren't we? Because we've had that year, and so we've how do you feel you're going to approach this next easing of, so there's some people that are really hopeful that it's going to fully lift. We don't really know. Are you going for rhythm and relationships as your next thing, or do you feel like it's something different now?
I'm going all out to see as many people legally as possible as I can, and if I can go on holiday, I'd love to as well. I think that's the challenge, isn't it, for the whole of society in some respect, not to just go straight back in. I think I hope that we learn a few things. So I hope for me personally, I hope I'm more grateful. I talked about gratitude. I hope I'm more grateful thing, and I hope that I don't quickly become ungrateful again. I think we, looking back on these moments of what we've lost and what we've missed, I think that's really important. I'm really looking forward to worshiping with others again. I've really missed being in a kind of church, in those. I won't take singing for granted. I'm not a great singer. My wife says I'm more quantity than quality, but that's okay. And so I think there's I won't, I think there's a moment where I can't wait to get back to some of that. And I think all of us really will. I hope that some of the lessons we've learned about friendship actually we'll take forward, and I hope that hope that for me personally, but also as society, we've all got to know our neighbours a bit better. I think. I hope some of that continues. So yes, I hope we learn our lessons. I hope we learn the lessons we're meant to.
Brilliant. So you obviously, one of your passions is evangelism and sharing the message of Jesus. And it struck me when you were saying earlier that we've lost so many of those accidental interactions, and we've been really intentional with the close people. And so one of the challenges I think for church at the moment is we want to sort of take advantage of those off the cuff moments, but they've been slightly lost and we're slightly digital. And what would be your kind of thoughts and reflections on how we can continue to reach out and share our faith at a time where some of the things we normally would have accessible are not there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the fact that you can't invite people to church in the same way you used to should have helped us to think about how we're going to reach people in this season. And I think at the same time, I've talked about the landscape of relationships changing. Loads more. I saw some really fascinating stats about a lot of us have spent more time with friends and family, not less, because we've had to be more intentional about it. And I think research and experience tells me that the way people come to faith is through friends. There was a piece of research done a couple of years ago, and they asked a load of Christians, who were the most significant people on your journey of faith? You know, and I think if you've asked most Christians, they would have said, well, there was an evangelist who did a talk, there was a vicar, there was a youth worker. The most significant relationship in helping people come to faith is a friend. And I'm not, in some ways, I'm not surprised by that, because when I've spoken to people, I love hearing people's stories of how they've become Christians. And there's almost always a friend in the background praying, inviting them to stuff. And so I think this season has kind of helped to see that a bit more, because people haven't stumbled into church in the same way. And the invite people to online stuff, I think, is a bit easier. So we've got friends who, and I guess in terms of the advice, this is my, alongside my first piece of advice. My first piece of encouragement is, if your friends are going to come to know Jesus, you're almost certainly the most influential person to see that happen. And that can be a real pressure, but don't let it be a pressure. Let it be a joy. Let that be an encouragement. And the two things I'd say is, first of all, get praying. We've got a list of people who we pray for as a family every night to come to faith. We wrote a list at the beginning of the year who were like, we are going to pray for these people. And you know what? It might take 10 years, or they might come to faith this year. But we're praying for them to come to faith. So get praying for people. If you've not got a list of people to pray to come to faith, get doing that. And the second thing is, I think the invite is easier. So we're on that list of people. We've got a couple who we invite to Alpha. And I don't know, but I don't think they would have come if it had been in a building. But because it was on Zoom on a Monday night, they both came, and they both came to every week. And it was at a time in the autumn when there was a bit of lockdown lifting. They were so keen to come that even when he was on a conference in a hotel and she was at home, they both zoomed in on separate Zoom accounts and came along. And so I think that invite, don't stop inviting people. And I think within that also being prepared to be able to share something of why you're a Christian with people, and think about the language you might use. I think those would be my top tips, really.
Yeah, and it's really great that you talk about what I want to say about the story, because story is a really key word in your life at the moment, because you've just released a book called Storybearer, which I own, but I can't find it anywhere because I've been reading it.
Looks like this.
Yeah, no, please show us. So could you explain a little bit about that book? Because this all links together, doesn't it?
Yeah, I wrote the book because of that simple premise that people come to faith through friends. And I wrote it because I think we could all be, myself included, be more effective at sharing our faith with our mates. And so often, even I'm a card-carrying professional evangelist. When my friends start a conversation with me about faith, often I can kind of, what do I say? But I think so often the best thing we can do is just tell our story. Is simply say, this is what faith means to me. And it's not just your testimony, but actually putting language around, for me, if you ask me about my story, I talk about purpose and meaning. I talk about the fact that, with the bereavements that I've experienced the last year, the presence of God with me and the comfort that I've experienced through that, the fact that I belong to the church and the family, but as well as knowing the deep forgiveness in my life, God's presence giving me life today, but also hope for the future. All of that's kind of part of my story, but it's personalized to me. And so often now, when someone asks me about why I'm a Christian, why I follow Jesus, in a conversation down the pub or now on Zoom, the best thing we can do is tell our story. So the book is about the power of story, the power of being able to share our own story, thinking about the greatest story ever told in the Bible and how we communicate that relevantly, but also how do we be a great friend and listen to the other person's story. And I think what I love about Jesus is what his evangelistic approach to the people he encountered was not one size fits all, because he listened to their story and kind of said, well, and here's how I, as the bread of life, the light of the world, the true vine, the way, the truth, and the life, fit into that story. And so in my experience, as I've kind of, shared my faith with my mates over the years, listening and hearing, where is God already at work in their life? What bit of my story do I tell to connect with that? And what bit of God's story can I bring in, share some of that as well? So the book's about that. And there's there's loads of stories of my complete fails when it's come to sharing faith, as well as a couple of good news stories where, my best mate came to faith when we were 21, and a few stories like that. So it's a real encouragement. Would love people to check it out.
Yeah, it's really, really helpful, because it's that relationship, that listening and that mutual sharing, because I tend to find that it's so easy if you're in the pub and you talk about sport and you and it goes back and forth. And yet there's something that I think sometimes I'm guilty of, or Christians can be guilty of, is panicking if Christianity comes up. It's like, yeah. But we would talk about going to Tesco's and we talk about our marriage. And what do you think it is that when all of a sudden faith or church comes up, that we go, I want to get that right? And there's almost there's a barrier there, isn't it? Why it's not such a natural, you talk about other things, but why is it that we are not so comfortable sharing that, do you think, from your experience?
I mean, I think there's loads of different reasons. Even for just one person, there might be lots of different reasons, but also for individuals, that there's different reasons there. So I think so often for me personally, I like to be liked. I want people to like me, and I'm scared that if I bring up faith and that people will like me less. That's definitely a barrier I've needed to get over. I think so often we are scared that they will ask us a question we don't know the answer to.
Yeah.
And so we sometimes think, well, I've got to know everything. And the reality is, actually, if we know our story, we can share some of that, and that might help people understand further. And if people are really interested, then we can help them with, we can go back. And sometimes if they ask us a question we don't know, we can say, I don't know. Let me find out about that. So there's a bit of that. I think another reason why we don't share our faith as readily is sometimes we kind of, where we're at in our relationship with Jesus isn't always amazing. And so for me, if I, when I'm in a really good place with God, there's an overflow that comes. So the best thing we can do to help people know Jesus is be full of God ourselves. Yeah. So that there's something that just overflows, that you talk about other things that people talk about, if you want to know what someone's really passionate about, it's the thing that it's often the thing they talk about the most. So you can't, for me, I don't want, if I encountered someone who I'd never met before, in that first half an hour, if they were to think about who getting to know me, I'd hope that I'd mention faith at some point, because it's the most important thing about me. It's the thing that defines me. And so I think sometimes there's a bit of that, but I do think there's loads of reasons. And in the book, we look a bit about some of those barriers, and really the book's there to help people overcome some of that confidence of what to say. It probably can't help you with if you're concerned about being liked, but I can certainly empathize with some of that.
Yeah, and it's encouraging because we're just about to when this conversation goes out, it will probably be just before our first online alpha. So we were going to do it at some point. We're trying it again. There's a real sense of I've been thinking about how Jesus, that throwing out of the net, and you do the invitations, and actually sometimes the invitation is the alpha, but actually you can keep encouraging people to move forward. I think I want to pick away a little bit about the opportunities that you think are in this time and in this season that maybe, whether it's evangelism or church, that you've seen where you're like, this is so unique to now, let's take advantage of this. Yeah. What do you think are the things that we could really go, wow, let's grab that or take advantage of that?
Yeah, I think we've got to be really real. I think, first of all, I think people talking about this as a bittersweet moment, and so just talking about the opportunities, I think we'd lose a few people. But I think, because it has been hard. But I am also, as an evangelist, as a Christian, I'm so encouraged by the openness it seems that people have to faith at this time. And it's quite counterintuitive, isn't it? You'd think that at a time of great natural disaster, people would throw faith out the window and say, well, if this is happening, there's no way there's a God, I'm out, And but what we're seeing is, there's some fascinating research from two different sources. If it was from one, I might not believe, from two different sources. Somewhere between a third and a half of all 18 to 34-year-olds in the UK have logged on to online church at some point in the last year. That is astonishing. There's another stat that found 1 in 20 people of all ages who've never prayed before the pandemic. That's about 3.5 million people in the UK have started praying as a result of this time. It's amazing. And I think there's what I don't think is going to happen is, I think in your church and my church, there's not going to be people banging on the door, come June the 23rd or whenever we open. I don't think that's going to be where we're at.
No.
But I do think, well, no, it might be. I do think that there's a kind of spiritual porousness to people in this time. And therefore, there's a real great opportunity. I think if I think about the online alpha we both alluded to, we had more people on our online Alpha course in the autumn than we've ever had at an Alpha course at our church. You know, that I hear from Alpha that pre-2020, there've been 0 online Alpha courses. Last year, there were 5,000 online Alpha courses across the UK. So I'm really encouraged by that. I think the other thing that I'd say around the church is, I think the church has done amazingly. I think so often we can be down on church. The stories we've heard as the EA of churches caring for the vulnerable, looking after people, have been amazing. You know, and I think the economic challenges off the back of the aftershocks of the pandemic are only going to make things worse. And we need to continue as the church to kind of meet some of those needs, but do it together with word and deed.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to pick up the 20s to the 18 to sort of 30 age group, which I think so many churches are thinking about. We've got unique opportunities with digital, we've got all these kind of things. And so I was having a conversation with a prayer partner this week, and she said to me, and she may even watch this, so she'll know who she is, she said to me that there was a church that she knows that deliberately, fully and wholeheartedly said it was an 18 to 30s church. And then, so St. Mark's, the church in context that we're in, is a very much an all-age church, a family church reaching all age groups, and has the kind of, you know, the regulars and the 20s to 30s coming in and out. Do you think that churches to reach the 18 to 30s have to have a separate strand that reaches them? Or do you believe that we can incorporate them somehow and I say them, but there's so many churches like St. Mark's that are desperate to reach this age group, but don't have the capacity to turn into an 18 to 30s church. So what's your view on that? Do you think they should be separate together or contextual to your church?
My personal view is that we should fight for intergenerational church. Yeah. I don't think what we need is a slightly older youth group for 18 to 30s. I think one of the things in our society that we've experienced over the last couple of years is divisions and divisions between generations. So, you know, you look at Brexit, you've got younger generations blaming older generations over Brexit, rightly or wrongly. You've got over coronavirus, older generations blaming younger generations for spreading coronavirus. I think one of the most beautiful things about churches is that it's all ages all together. And I think we should fight for some of that family. And when you speak to young adults, what often they want is relationships, not just mentoring, but relationships with older people. Now, that doesn't mean that if a church is thriving amongst 18 to 30s because they've said, we really want to shoot for that I'm against that, because I think churches, you know, even within the Anglican family that we're part of, Caroline, churches look different, and it's a beautiful tapestry of the kingdom of God, isn't it? So I think therefore there are some churches who are going to say we're going to shoot for this age group, and often what they find is they get other age groups as well, because it's not always generational. It's kind of learning style or whatever. So I believe in the beautiful, rich tapestry of the whole church, but I will fight for intergenerational unity. Yeah. And as the EA, really, what we try to do is bring together evangelicals from across all kinds of spectrums, from denominations, from different backgrounds, stories, ethnicities, but ages as well. I feel particularly called to champion and speak into.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's really interesting, and I think this would be true of maybe churches nearby, is because that 18 to 20s to 30s group, you have that their life is changing, that some are going away, some are coming back, that you can find in the churches you have this desire for this intergeneration, and then there just naturally starts becoming this gap, and then it can widen. Or what would be your encouragement to churches that are like, actually, we'd love to make it less of a gap, but we recognize that there's the families and slightly older, and then we've got the youth and children, but there's sort of this kind of flurrying of 20s to 30s that are slightly around, but it can be obvious that it's not always there. What would be your thoughts on us helping that generation to become part of our church more?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is to really listen, and listen on a couple of levels. So first of all, listen to young adults themselves. And so, you know, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is making sure at every level of leadership there's kind of young adult representation. because I think often churches grow old because they've not got that leadership voice in there, because, you know, whether we like it or not, there have been rapid cultural changes that have happened over the last kind of 20, 30, just over the last year, let alone the last couple of decades. That has impacted these generations, and is not the sole factor, but is a significant factor in the challenges around 20s and 30s. I think listen to young adults themselves. I think also continue to listen to culture and what's happening there. So, for example, when I've spoken to churches about reaching young adults, there is a whole resource that's coming out in the summer that's going to help churches do this. But just to kind of, you know, I haven't got time to go into all of it. One question we ask is, how do you think people are going to find you? Because no young adult, often no older person, will go anywhere without checking the web presence first. Now, I've had a look at your website; it's absolutely glorious. But often churches don't put the energy they could do into that, and that's a huge factor in whether a 20. You know, people will often take one look at a website and decide, I'll have a look at that or not. And most churches in the UK have such a compelling story to tell, have a beautiful family for people to join, but they just don't tell that story in their online presence. It's Kerry Newhoff who says that the website and social media are the new foyer of the church. And as I talk to leaders in this area, so many say, do you know what, we got this person who came, who followed us on Instagram for 6 years before coming along. And I think there's something about, you know, that's just one example of listening to young adults, listening to culture. We could be here all afternoon looking at other things, but you know, those two things are key lessons we need to learn.
Yeah, and that's been one of the things I really love of this particular season, that digital and online ministry felt like an extra if you want to do it, and now it's become it's a primary ministry to reach out and to meet with people. That's really encouraging. I want to focus on just two different areas. I want to talk a little bit about the Lament and the season that we're particularly in, but there is a phrase on the Evangelical Alliance site which says changing church. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so we've just recognized that church has changed over the last year. It doesn't take a genius to work that out. And so what we've done is in helping our 3,500 member churches and others to move forward is basically ask some of that question. What is God doing at the moment in society? What's God doing in the church? How might God be challenging us to learn the lessons from coronavirus? We did 2 really significant pieces of research where we asked leaders what was going on and to get a kind of landscape. So that those 2 pieces were under the kind of changing church banner. We then individually called each of our 3,500 member churches. You were a recipient of one of those calls, Caroline, and just to hear what God was doing. And what that gave us is a kind of unique bird's eye view of what was happening. And so the whole changing church kind of suite of resources really is to help think about what's been going on. So to help churches do online stuff during the pandemic, but also now we're looking at re-entry as we go back to a new normal. Let's not throw away the lessons that we've learned. Let's just not go back to what we used to be doing. Let's make the most of the spiritual hunger in our nation, and also let's not exclude those people who've suddenly been included. So in our local church, we have a number of different people who, for whatever reason, cannot get to church on a Sunday morning, and they have been included in a way that they just weren't 18 months ago. And so for us as a local church in Birmingham, it would be unconscionable for us to go back to not allowing them to access. But you know what, at the moment, my mate Eric can do the reading. He can take part in the prayers. So we're playing with I mean, I don't know how we're going to make it happen, but we're playing with the idea of having a screen in the church with Eric and whoever else can't make it their face on, so that they can still do bits in the service. So it's not just they can watch a video later if they like, and we'll stream it, but we can go, right, we're now coming over to Eric to do the work or whatever. And I think those kind of things we've just got to learn from, and the church will be healthier and bigger and deeper as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where we're at. It almost feels like in some ways that a lot of this year has been there was the crisis leadership, there was what can we do in this time, and God created fruits where he wanted to create fruits. And we are moving into that re-emerging and that opportunity. I've been talking to some Marks or some people about how it feels like we've had all the furniture removed, and what are we going to put in and what are we going to take out? And we've got this phrase of recover, rebuild, reach out, discover, to keep that sense of discovery. But what's been really interesting in the conversation we've been having is we've been asking, well, what is church? And so the difference between a community group to a kingdom group and all that kind of thing. So I'm going to ask you the question, which is such a wide question. But what is church? What's the difference between us and anyone else?
It's like a kind of theological interview, isn't it? What is church? I think that the primary word that comes to mind when I think of church is family. And I think the reason, it's not just family, I'll come on to the next bit in a minute, but I think we had this hilarious PCC meeting where I'm not very good with Anglican language, Caroline, so you can help me out. The archdeacon or the area dean or someone came along and they sat in our PCC meeting, and I thought it'd be fun. I was chairing the meeting, so I said I thought it'd be fun to kind of go around and get people to say what they most loved about St. Bees was, which is our church. And it was really, for first person goes, do you know what? I just love this church. It's like a family. Next person, I love this church. It's like a family. And it goes around, and without kind of any kind of, some people said something slightly different, but family came over and again. And I think in an age where so many people struggle with family, church is family, but it's not just family, it's family on a mission. And I think that one of the things that we desperately need to press into in this stage is that we're not, and especially with return to buildings, is we're not a kind of huddle in a family with our backs faced. We are moving forward. Jesus said, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not stand against it. He didn't say, I will build my church and its gates will stand against the forces of hell. There's a dynamic there about the church, isn't there? There's a kind of active movement and energy about kind of a church that's pressing forward. And I think that as a picture of a family on mission would be, I guess, there's loads of different ways of defining church, isn't there? But I think, you look at the early church, in the book of Acts, where you've got the kind of the loving connections between people. They've laid their lives down for Jesus, but also for each other. They are closer than family members. Jesus says, if you don't hate your family, and what he's saying is, there is a closer bond between him that has to be between himself and his followers and his followers themselves. And that kind of explosive growth that we experience through Acts happens because they want to press on, but they want to do so as a family.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And we're just about to go into a series about Acts to think this through. And one of the things that that's been rolling around in my head is the sense of the season of gathering sheep, and the sense of actually the sheep have almost been scattered. And you've got the one sheep that's caught in the barbed wire, and we have to help that come out. But you've got the new lambs, and you've got the sheep panic, but actually that sense of gathering, and you might gather them in different pens because we all can't get together. But that sense of actually, like you just said, not just holding on to ourselves, but actually that new people have been grafted in and stuff. But it's been really hard because so many people, coming back to this really sense of lament, have said that actually it's just too much. Going back to church is just absolutely a reminder of restrictions. It's just something I've had someone say to me this morning. And so that ministry of God's Spirit to help us to cope with hard stuff. So if it's okay, I'd like to ask you, we've actually released onto my Facebook your lament video, which spoken word, which was absolutely fantastic. Can you share how that came about and what your heart behind that was when you did that?
Yeah. I mean, I guess like all of us, just as I've articulated earlier, we've just really struggled during the season. And I think, some of that kind of pain, anxiety, that sense of loss, the uncertainty of the future, I wanted to create something that expressed that. And there have been passages, you talked earlier about the kind of the things that have sustained me. And one of the things that's really sustained me, I've had a few Bible passages that have just meant so much during this season. I think, one of them being the kind of, we have this treasure in jars of clay, we are cracked and broken, but we got a treasure. There's another one in Jeremiah 17, which talks about, the being rooted, the image of the tree being rooted and doesn't fear when heat comes, that kind of thing. But one of those passages is Lamentations 3, which is the lament, and, Jeremiah is so real in that, I've forgotten what prosperity is. So I say my splendor is gone and my soul is downcast within me. And yet there's this moment around kind of verse 22 where Jeremiah says, yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. And he's kind of saying, he's saying to his soul almost, I am going to hope. And so that was the lament came from a bit of that, really. And but also the kind of nostalgic journey. I don't know. One of the things that I found really funny was, when I began to write it, was the kind of, looking back at how I felt this time last year, there's a line at the beginning, a slight change of plans, just wash your hands. It's like the flu, remember, we'll stay at home, do pee with Joe. It'll be over by September, And then you gradually got a sense in which this is not going away.
Yeah.
And maybe still isn't for a while. But so the reason admittedly it was to kind of really go, this has sucked, but we've got to choose to focus on hope.
Absolutely. And you very kindly shared that this has been a time where there's been some losses, and most certainly in St. Mark's, that's been very real for a lot of people. Yeah. There's been a slight feeling of grieving those losses without having the normal structures around. And what would you say to people that have actually said, the loss has just been unbearable and I can't see God in it, and actually I'm hurting still? What might you say to those that have been in that position?
Yeah, that it does get better. I think, I lost my dad at 21, and those were kind of some of the darkest moments of my life. And I reckon the grief period lasts about 2 years, and that doesn't, that for me, with that, someone told me that when dad first died, and I reckon it was 2 of his birthday, 2 of my birthday, 2 Christmases, before it began to get that little bit easier. I think it's okay to be really honest and real with God, and honest and real with other people. Just in the last year with my brother-in-law, prayed and fasted for months that he would get better, and he didn't. And it's okay to go to God with the reality of this is just it's just awful. And I think the other thing is around community. And there's that thing that people say, where people say, if there's anything I can do, I would say ask for stuff. Sounds really silly. I'd say if you're one of those people who want to say, if there's anything I can do, don't just say that, but just do something. When Mum died last summer, we didn't cook an evening meal for 2 months, because the church stepped up in an amazing way. Our kitchen looked like Clinton's cards, living room like a florist. It was I think that being part of community and allowing people to bless you is really key, and you're not in it on your own. But so and cling to some stuff. I talked about that lament verse. Find some verses and cling to them, and do not let go. But I can promise you, as someone who's known not as much pain and grief as some, but more than others, it does get easier. There is grace, and God is still true, and God's still good, God's still faithful, God's still true. One of my best friends talks about the fact that him and his wife nearly lost a baby, and they were in the ward in the hospital, not knowing whether the baby was going to be alive when after the procedure. And kind of he sits there and he prays, Lord, if this baby lives, you're good, but if it dies, you're still good. And I think there's something of, in the storm, we must cling to the fact that God's still God, God's still good, and he has an eternal perspective. And one day every tear will be wiped from every eye. I think there's a kind of eternal thing you've got to grab onto. But I totally, if there's people who are feeling that pain, I don't know if you can tell, but I totally feel that, but want you to know that God's there, and God's still good, and he's with you, and he's for you.
And he's so honoring that he cares and gives that comfort and support. And so there's that active place of, if you're the caregiver, that actually being active and being there. And I was saying to somebody the other day that sometimes it's not what you say on the phone, it's the fact you rang, because you remember who rang. And it's okay to not get it right, but who's there. And God's got that healing, comforting hand, even if it takes a little longer. I want to slightly move to just this next season, a bit of faith and uncertainty stuff, and then I think we've probably stolen quite a bit of your time. But just because of the fact that there's that acknowledgement that we don't really know exactly what the next few months are going to hold for us all, what would you say to the people that are like slightly enjoying the easing of lockdown, but I'm also a bit cautious? Like, what would you say to someone as we head towards this next season? What would you encourage us with?
Yeah, I guess to cling to and to remember and to take the best from this season, I think is the first thing. So one thing we've done, we've not had as a church, we've not had a vicar during this time. So I've not had communion with my church family for over a year. So what we've done as a family is we've tried to make Friday night really special. And so we, as soon as work finished on Friday, we go up and we do a bit of communion together as a family, and it's just amazing. And those moments, and you know what, we're going to continue to do that. You know, the some of the stuff around friendship, the intentionality that we've had around friendship, I'm going to keep doing that. I think the recognizing how fragile we all are. I don't know whether you and other people have felt this, but I felt really fragile during this time. And I think I'm looking forward to feeling a bit less fragile, but also, you know, what I've learned is of myself and others is that encouragement just goes a really long way. And so I think there's a kind of, I hope that some of the stuff that I've learned around my own fragility, but also my own ability to, an inclination to be able to bless and be generous to other people, I'm going to learn from as we move forward. And that gratitude piece as well, man. I hope in a year's time, we've had a few months under our belt of being able to worship together as a community. I am not going to moan about what songs we sing in church for a while. You know, I'm not going to, you know, if I go to Starbucks and my order isn't quite, you know, what I'm not going to moan for a while, you know, and I hope some of those things we kind of carry forward into the future. But I think also you're absolutely right. And I think what you just alluded to about people taking it at different paces is probably quite true as well. And being gentle and looking after people. And it's, things have moved so quickly. Now I've had my first vaccine, but I've got friends who are really uncertain and anxious about it. And you know what? I'm not going to come down on them like a ton of bricks because they're a bit nervous about it. You know, I wholeheartedly think we should be taking the vaccine, but I recognise that other people take a bit longer to adjust to stuff. And so I think let's be really gentle with each other as we move forward. Let's recognise our own fragility. Let's keep encouraging people, but also let's be really grateful for that which we do have, and let's try not to lose any of that as we come out the other side.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for allowing us to be able to grill you of all sorts of different things. This is the final question. So is there anything else that you might want to say or inspire us, or even something that's been rolling around in your head? Do you think, actually, that I'd just really like to share with a bunch of people?
No, I don't think so. It's been fun. It's been really fun, Caroline. I should say something profound at this point. No, I don't. I think we've covered it all. But yeah, no, I think I'll bring us back to that lament piece, because what that does is, I think, has been covered up so much this call, because it's been about stopping to look back. This is a moment, isn't it? I don't know when this video goes out, but if it goes anytime around about now, this is a moment to stop and look back, but also look forward with hope. And so I think those are my closing final words of wisdom.
They're perfect. It's perfect. Thank you so much. There's so much encouragement for us all there. We're really, really, really grateful. Storybearer, where can people get that book if they want to get hold of it?
You can get it wherever you get your books. So and please let me know what you think as well. So it was a terrible time to launch a book, so we launched it the first week of lockdown. So we cancelled all these launch events with like hundreds of people come in, did an online launch. It was an absolute hoot. But you can get it basically anywhere. But the encouragement that's come back has been amazing. So if you like it, please let me know. If God uses it to change you in an amazing way, definitely let me know. If you hate it, you can let Caroline know. But yeah, would love you to take a look.
Brilliant. And and we'll keep an eye on the Evangelical Alliance website for the missing generation, the research that's all there. There's some really good stuff. But thank you so much, Phil, for being with us. We want to be able to be praying for the Evangelical Alliance. Is there anything particular that you want us to pray for at this time? And then we'll close.
Yeah, and we our kind of focus really as we go forward is we want to be really brave and really kind. And we recognize that the landscape is difficult out there. For people are increasingly hostile towards Bible believing, good news focused Christians. And so we as the EA want to stand up and speak out on all of our behalf. Do you know what? If you're not an individual member of the Evangelical Alliance, would urge you to become one, because that really, really helps us speak out with greater authority. And we want to be really brave there, but also, do you know what, we want to be really kind as well. So we really want to reflect Jesus, and that all of that helps make Jesus known across the UK. Let's make the most of this spiritual hunger that we're all experiencing. And also let's do that together, and let's be united. And so you can pray for us to be really brave and really kind over the coming years.
Brilliant. We will do that going forward. Thank you so much for a really fruitful time with you, Phil. We pray all blessings over everything that you're doing, and thank you so much. We will see you very soon.